The day I found my house gone, the sky was too calm for what had happened. No thunder, no omen. Just a pale California morning, the kind that smells faintly of dust and regret. I stood on the curb with a paper bag of prescriptions in one hand, staring at the door I had painted robin egg blue 30 years ago. Only it wasn't my door anymore.
There was a for sale sign in the yard, tilted slightly as if embarrassed. My rose bushes, my Henry Fonda yellows, had been trimmed into polite obedience. A new brass number gleamed where mine used to hang crooked, and the key I had held on to through widowhood, through every lonely Christmas, refused to turn in the lock. At first, I thought maybe I was disoriented. 3 months in a rehabilitation center can twist your sense of time and place. I'd had a mild stroke, mild they called it, as if any part of your body refusing to cooperate could ever be gentle. And the doctors had insisted I rest. My son, Evan, had taken charge of the bills. "Just temporary, Mom," he'd said, slipping papers under my weak hand. "You just focus on getting better." Now, standing on the porch I'd swept for decades, I pressed the doorbell. The chime that answered wasn't mine. It was too cheerful, too foreign. A woman in yoga pants opened the door. She had a face like sunlight filtered through glass, pleasant but distant. "Yes?" she asked, clutching a mug. I think there's been a mistake," I said. "This is my home. I'm Martha Wilkins. I've lived here for 42 years. Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry. We bought this house last month. The agent was Evan Wilkins?" Her words scattered like gravel in my chest. I didn't hear the rest. I just stood there, feeling the ground tilt. I remember stepping back, slow, careful, like a child who's wandered into the wrong classroom. I heard the door close behind me with a soft finality. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. My husband's old Buick was gone from the driveway, the one Evan promised he'd store safely. Even the wind chime by the kitchen window, my late husband's gift, was missing. I sat down on the curb, the paper bag tearing open, pills rolling into the gutter like tiny white lies. That's when it hit me. My own son had sold my house, while I was lying in a hospital bed trying to relearn how to hold a spoon. I wish I could tell you I screamed or called the police or stormed into his office demanding justice. But shock has a strange mercy. It numbs you just enough to keep you from collapsing. I just sat there watching a squirrel dart across the empty driveway and thought, he wouldn't, he couldn't, but he had. A passing car slowed. A man leaned out, squinting. "You okay, ma'am?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, just waiting for my son." Except I wasn't. I was waiting for my heart to catch up with what my eyes already knew. That night, I checked into a cheap motel near the rehab center. The wallpaper smelled like mildew and lemon cleaner. I called Evan. "Mom?" His voice was too bright, the kind of brightness that hides something. "Evan," I said softly, "where's my house?" He exhaled, a long, weary sigh. "Mom, listen. It was getting too hard to maintain. You were in rehab, the bills were piling up, and look, you're better off now. You've got money in your account, I made sure of it. I transferred everything legally. You signed the power of attorney." "I thought it was temporary," I whispered. "I thought you were just paying the utilities." "Mom," he said again, softer this time, like he was speaking to a child. "You always said you wanted to downsize." I hung up before he could finish. Because in that moment, I realized something I'd been denying for years. I had raised a man who loved control more than he loved truth. I spent the next week drifting between motel rooms and hospital follow-ups. My hand still trembled when I buttoned my blouse. Every nurse who smiled at me seemed to know something I didn't. It wasn't just the loss of walls and furniture, it was the loss of history. The loss of a place where every doorknob had a memory. Evan didn't call again. Not once. So I did what nurses do when there's nothing left to fix. I survived. I found a small trailer on the outskirts of Riverside. $600 a month. It smelled like mothballs and old rain, but the window overlooked a line of dying eucalyptus trees, and at sunset they burned gold. I bought a used recliner from a thrift store, a kettle, and one plate. I told myself it was freedom. Some nights, though, I'd wake up reaching for the pull chain of the lamp that wasn't there anymore. Months passed. I took a part-time job as a caregiver for an elderly man named Arthur, who had Alzheimer's and called me Margie every day. I didn't correct him. There was something merciful in being someone else. On quiet evenings, I'd sit outside my trailer with instant coffee and listen to the coyotes howl in the canyon. I imagined Evan in his big house, surrounded by sleek furniture and screens, and wondered if he ever thought about the robin egg door, the rose bushes, or the mother who raised him in that house. But life, as I've learned, has a long memory. It waits. One night, nearly a year later, my phone buzzed. It was past midnight. Evan flashed on the screen. For a long moment, I didn't answer. I watched the name glow, fade, glow again. Then I picked up. "Mom," his voice cracked, thin, desperate. "I need your help." I said nothing. "Please," he whispered. I lost everything. The silence between us stretched like a wound that never healed. "Evan," I finally said, my voice steady. "You sold my house," he started crying. Not the polite kind, the kind that comes from the gut. That was the moment I realized the universe had its own quiet way of balancing things. And yet, even then, part of me wanted to hold him, the same way I had when he was 6 and scraped his knees. But I didn't. Not yet, because some lessons need to ache before they heal. When I hung up the phone that night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat on the edge of my narrow trailer bed, staring at the glow of the clock, 12:47 a.m., and listened to the old pipes breathing. It was the same kind of silence that followed my husband's funeral. Thick, oddly kind, as if the world knew I had nothing left to say. Outside, the desert wind pressed gently against the aluminum walls. Somewhere far away, a train whistled, the sound of something leaving or something arriving. I couldn't tell which anymore. I made tea I didn't drink. Then, I opened the small wooden box that held what little I'd saved. A faded photo of Evan when he was 5, missing his front teeth, my wedding ring, and a folded deed to a house that no longer existed. When you're 68, loss doesn't surprise you, but betrayal still does. The next morning, I drove to work early. Arthur was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket, mumbling to himself. "Morning, Margie," he said. "Did you bring the dogs?" He meant the biscuits. I smiled. "Of course," he chuckled, toothless and warm. "You're a good girl." Sometimes I thought God sent me Arthur as a kind of mercy. His memory came and went like sunlight through clouds. Some days, he remembered his late wife and cried for her. Other days, he'd call me Mom, and I'd let him. Because caring for him was like holding a broken mirror. You could see your own fractures reflected back. That day, he reached for my hand. "You look sad," he said. I paused. "Do I?" He nodded slowly. "You've been left behind, haven't you?" The words hit too close. I smiled weakly. "Maybe a little." He squeezed my fingers. "Then keep walking, girl. Don't stop where they dropped you." He didn't remember saying it later, but I did. That evening, when my shift ended, I sat in my car outside his house and finally listened to Evan's voicemail. "Mom, I messed up. The firm's gone. The market crashed, my partner disappeared, and I lost everything. I have nowhere to go. I need to see you." There was a pause, a raw inhale. "I know you hate me. You should. But you're the only person who ever cared about me without wanting something back." He hung up before I could hear him breathe again. For a moment, I almost started the car, drove into the night, and found him. Motherhood is a strange disease. It survives every wound. But then I saw my reflection in the rearview mirror, the gray in my hair, the tremor in my jaw. And I realized forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, but choosing peace anyway. Still, peace takes time. 2 days later, he showed up. I was sweeping the dust off the porch of my trailer when I heard tires crunching on gravel. A silver sedan, the same one he used to drive to open houses, rolled to a stop. It looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from too many miles and not enough pride. Evan stepped out. His once perfect hair was unkempt, his shirt untucked. For the first time since he was a teenager, he looked small. "Mom." I didn't answer. I leaned on my broom, waiting. He walked closer. The air between us, thick with all the years we'd both wasted pretending everything was fine. I didn't know where else to go, he said softly. I studied him, the lines of his face, the tired blue eyes that used to light up when he ran home from school. You sold my home, I said. The place your father built with his hands. The one where you took your first steps. He lowered his gaze. I know, I was stupid. I thought I was saving us both. I thought... He hesitated. I thought money could fix things. And did it? I asked. He laughed once, hollow. No, money's gone. Friends, too. Turns out people like you best when you're buying drinks. He looked around, at the trailer, the cracked earth, the humming power line. Is this where you live now? Yes. His lips parted, as if he wanted to apologize again, but couldn't find the words. I saw the shame sitting on his shoulders like a heavy coat. Can I come in? He asked. I nodded slowly. Inside, my trailer smelled like coffee and detergent. He stood awkwardly near the door, as if afraid to disturb anything. Sit, I said. He sat on the recliner I bought from the thrift store, his knees almost touching the small table where my unpaid bills lay like little tombstones. I don't have much, I said. But I have tea, he smiled faintly. You always have tea. I poured it carefully, my hands steady now, steadier than they'd been in months. He took a sip and sighed. I kept thinking about that house, he said. Every night, the smell of Dad's cologne in the hallway, the creak on the third step. God, Mom, what was I thinking? You were thinking like someone afraid, I said. Afraid of losing control, he looked up, eyes wet. You always understand me better than I do. I'm your mother. It's my curse. For a long moment we said nothing. The clock ticked, the tea steamed. Outside the wind picked up, rattling the trailer walls like a heartbeat. Finally, he said, Mom, can I stay here? Just until I get back on my feet? The question hung between us, fragile and cruel. I looked at him, my only son, my greatest joy, and my deepest wound, and felt something old and quiet rise inside me. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. You can stay, I said finally, but not forever. You need to learn what it feels like to build something you can't sell. He nodded, his eyes shining. Thank you. I wanted to say, don't thank me yet. But instead I said, there's a blanket in the cupboard. The floor gets cold at night. When I turned away, my hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the strange weight of forgiveness beginning to form. The first night Evan slept in my trailer, the wind never stopped. It clawed at the thin metal walls, whistling through the seams like something alive. I lay awake on my small bed, listening to his breathing from the recliner across the narrow room. Every exhale sounded like an apology he didn't know how to make. Around 3 a.m., the coyotes began to howl, a chorus of raw hunger echoing through the canyon. Evan stirred, muttered something in his sleep. I turned my face to the ceiling and whispered to the dark, God, help me not to hate him. Morning came pale and cold. Evan was already outside, shirtless, washing his car with a cracked bucket and my dish soap. The sight of him there, barefoot, hair messy, humming softly, made something ache in me. He looked like a boy again. I stepped outside with 2 mugs of coffee. You'll scratch the paint with that sponge, I said. He grinned sheepishly. Old habits die hard. You never liked that car much anyway, I said. I used to think it meant success, he replied. Now it just means debt. He took the coffee, his hand brushing mine, a brief, awkward connection that carried years of unsaid things. We sat in silence for a while, watching the morning sun stretch across the desert. Finally, I asked, What happened, Evan? Really? He stared at the horizon, jaw tight. The market slowed down. I got desperate, started flipping properties I couldn't afford. The firm looked good on paper, but it was all borrowed time. When the crash hit, I panicked. I thought, if I could just sell one more house, I could fix it. I looked at him. And you sold mine, he winced. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd buy it back once things got better. But they didn't. He shook his head slowly. No, they didn't. I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me. You know, your father built that house one summer with his bare hands. Every board, every nail. He'd come home from the night shift, sleep 2 hours, then start hammering again. Said it was his way of proving to the world he could build something that lasted. Evan looked down, his voice cracking. I'm not like him. I know, I said softly. You were never supposed to be, but you could have learned from him. He didn't reply. That afternoon, I went to work at Arthur's house. He was in one of his foggy moods, mistaking me for a nurse from his youth. He asked me if I believed people could change. Sometimes, I said, but not all at once. Change is quiet. It happens when no one's looking. He nodded, eyes glassy. My son stopped talking to me years ago, he murmured. I don't even remember why. Must have been something stupid. When I got home that evening, Evan had cooked dinner. Spaghetti from a can, overcooked, but somehow endearing. The trailer smelled faintly of tomato sauce and effort. I figured it's your turn to be taken care of, he said, smiling shyly. I laughed, the sound foreign in my own mouth. It's a start. We ate at the little folding table, knees bumping under the plastic. I remember this, Evan said suddenly. You used to make spaghetti every Friday night. You'd burn the garlic bread, and Dad would tease you. And you'd sneak extra Parmesan when you thought I wasn't looking, he smiled. I thought I was clever. You never were, I said. He laughed, and for a moment the years fell away, the distance, the anger, the grief. For a heartbeat, we were just mother and son again, but memory is a fragile gift. After dinner, while washing dishes, I caught him staring at the small photo I kept on the shelf. Our old house, with its blue door and rose bushes. His expression shifted, as if something deep inside him had turned over. I went by there, he said quietly. A couple weeks ago, I froze. Why? I don't know. Maybe I wanted to see what I'd done. There's a new fence. They cut down Dad's oak tree. My breath caught. That tree was older than you. I know, he whispered. They built a swing set where it used to be. Their kids were playing there, and I thought, maybe they deserve it more than I did. I turned off the faucet, the water running down my wrists like tears. Evan, I said, you can't live your life trying to deserve things. You just have to stop destroying what you love. He didn't respond. But when he stood, I saw his shoulders shake once before he slipped outside. That night, I sat alone with my tea, listening to the desert hum. There was a strange peace in the air, the kind that only comes when a wound begins to close. I realized then that the house I lost wasn't just a structure. It was a vessel for years of laughter, arguments, bedtime stories, and quiet Sunday mornings. But maybe losing it forced me to see something else, that home isn't a place you live in. It's a truth you carry. I thought about the day I signed those papers in the hospital, my hands trembling, my trust blinding me. I remembered the way Evan kissed my forehead and said, "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it all under control." He did have control, until he didn't. And maybe that's how every tragedy starts, not with cruelty, but with the illusion that we can fix what isn't broken. Later that week, Evan found work at a construction site. He came home with blisters, smelling of sawdust and sun. There was humility in the way he moved, slow, careful, as if afraid to break anything else. "Guess I'm building houses now," he said one night. "Maybe I'll build you one someday," I smiled, stirring my tea. "Some homes can't be rebuilt." "Evan, but you can build yourself." He looked at me, really looked, and nodded. That was the first time I saw the man he might have been if greed hadn't swallowed him. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a single act. It's a slow unwrapping, a delicate peeling away of pride, anger, and disappointment until you're left holding something fragile and raw. Sometimes you mistake that rawness for peace. Sometimes it's just exhaustion wearing a prettier name. Evan had been living with me for almost 2 months. The trailer, once a sanctuary of quiet, now hummed with his restless energy, the pacing, the late-night phone calls, the whispered apologies to people who no longer picked up. He tried, though. God, he tried. He brought me flowers once, cheap ones from the gas station, but he arranged them carefully in a chipped mug. He fixed the loose cabinet door, changed the oil in my car, even repaired the old radio I hadn't heard play since my husband passed. And yet, every kindness carried a shadow. Every smile had a tremor behind it. Guilt has a way of seeping into every gesture, soft but unmistakable, like the smell of rain before a storm. One evening, we sat outside watching the sunset bleed across the desert, red turning to amber, amber to ash. He had a beer in his hand. I had tea. Do you ever think about Dad? I asked. All the time, he said. Mostly when I'm trying to figure out where I went wrong. You were 22 when he died, I said. You were just a boy. He shook his head. No, I was old enough to know better. He wanted me to stay at the hospital that night. I said I had a showing in the morning. I studied his profile, the same stubborn jaw, the same tired eyes. He wouldn't have blamed you. I blame me, he said quietly. And then I blamed you for being the strong one, for not breaking down like I did. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, one that no amount of forgiveness could quite soothe. Strength isn't what it looks like, I said. It's just the art of falling apart privately. He looked at me then, eyes glistening in the fading light. I wish I'd known that sooner. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of sage and dust. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, lonely and determined. You still have time, I said. The world doesn't end just because you lost something you thought was permanent. He laughed softly. You sound like a therapist. I sound like a woman who's lived long enough to stop pretending she's invincible. That night, I dreamt of my old house. In the dream, it wasn't gone, not exactly. It stood there, but the walls were transparent, like glass. I could see my younger self moving inside, folding laundry, cooking dinner, humming to the radio. I could see Evan at 10, chasing the dog through the hallway, and beyond the window, my husband waving from the garden. But when I tried to step inside, the door wouldn't open. I woke up with tears drying on my cheeks. Evan was already up, sitting at the small table, reading the classifieds. Bad dream? He asked without looking up. Old memories, I said. He nodded slowly. Those are worse. The weeks rolled on. The trailer became our fragile truce. Two people living in the aftermath of choices neither could undo. He brought home his first paycheck from the construction site and laid it on the table like an offering. Rent, he said. I stared at it. Evan, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted. I need to feel like I'm earning something again. I accepted it quietly. Not because I needed the money, but because he needed the dignity. That night, I found him sitting outside in the dark, smoking a cigarette, something he hadn't done since his 20s. You'll ruin your lungs, I said. He smirked faintly. They're already half ruined from guilt. Guilt doesn't kill you, I said. It just keeps you from living. He turned toward me, the cigarette glowing between his fingers. Mom, do you believe people like me deserve forgiveness? Forgiveness isn't about deserving, I said. It's about refusing to let bitterness decide who you are. He took a long drag, exhaled slowly. You make it sound easy. It isn't, I said. Every morning I still wake up angry. But every night I try to end the day remembering you're still my son. He nodded, his face breaking open with something like relief. I don't deserve you, I smiled faintly. No parent expects their children to deserve them. We just hope they come home before it's too late. A week later, he came home with a small box. I found this, he said, setting it on the table. Inside was a photograph, the three of us in front of the old house. I was holding a pie, your father had his arm around me, and Evan was mid-laugh, eyes bright and full of some long-forgotten innocence. Where did you find this? I whispered. In the attic of one of the houses I used to manage. I don't even know how it got there. Maybe I left it behind during a showing. Or maybe, he smiled sadly, maybe it found its way back. I traced the edges of the photograph with trembling fingers. Your father used to say that homes have souls, that they remember us even when we leave. Do you think that house remembers us? Yes, I said. But some memories hurt too much to hold. He looked down. I wish I could go back. So do I whispered. But forgiveness isn't about going back. It's about deciding what kind of person you'll be going forward. He nodded, eyes glistening. Then I'll be better. I swear, Mom, I'll be better. And for the first time since the day I lost that blue door, I believed him. That night, I took out the old wooden box again. I placed the photograph inside, next to my wedding ring and the folded deed. Then I closed it gently, like a prayer. Somewhere deep down, I realized that forgiving Evan didn't mean erasing the betrayal. It meant reclaiming the part of myself that had been held hostage by pain. And maybe, just maybe, That was enough. There are things you keep after loss, not because they're useful, but because they remind you who you were before the hurt. A chipped mug, a photo, a scent that still lingers in the folds of an old cardigan. These are the artifacts of a life that once felt permanent. My trailer had become a museum of such artifacts. The faded curtains from my old kitchen, the same teapot I'd bought in 1986, a quilt I stitched the winter after my husband died, patched with pieces of his shirts. Evan noticed them one morning while making coffee. "You really brought the whole house here, didn't you?" he said with a half-smile. "I brought what fit," I replied. He ran a hand over the quilt draped on the couch. "Dad's shirt," he murmured, touching the blue plaid square. "I remember this one. He wore it when we built my treehouse." "Until you fell out of it," I said, smiling faintly. He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "You ran outside barefoot. I remember you shouting at Dad and crying at the same time." "That's motherhood for you," I said. "Two emotions for every one mistake." He nodded, quiet now. "You've kept so much. I guess I tried to get rid of everything. Maybe that's why I never felt at home anywhere." I didn't answer, but his words stayed with me, because that was the difference between us. I carried my pain like a locket. He buried his and called it progress. Later that week, the desert finally got rain, thin, hesitant drops at first, then a heavy curtain. The sound against the trailer roof was deafening but comforting, like applause from heaven. Evan came home drenched, boots caked in mud, his construction uniform plastered to his skin. He looked exhausted but alive. "Got caught in the downpour," he said, laughing breathlessly. "But we finished the roof before it hit." "Good," I said. "You'll sleep well tonight." He poured himself a glass of water, then leaned against the counter, studying me. "You know, I never asked how it felt, losing the house." I looked up from my knitting. "Like losing a limb. You learn to walk without it, but the ghost pain never leaves." He nodded slowly, eyes soft. "I think I understand that now." "I don't think you do," I said, my tone gentle but firm. "You didn't just sell walls, Evan. You sold a lifetime. Every mark on those floors, every nail in those beams, they were pieces of us." His throat tightened. "I know, and I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "But apologies don't build new walls." He looked at me, confused. "Then what does?" "Consistency," I said. "Day after day, even when it's hard. That's how trust comes back." He nodded, almost like a student taking notes. "Then I'll keep showing up." And he did. Every morning I'd wake to the sound of him leaving, the door clicking softly, boots on gravel. He'd pack his lunch in a brown paper bag and leave a note on the counter. "See you at 6. Sometimes he'd draw a little smiley face, like he used to when he was in elementary school. At first, I thought it was silly, but after a while I found myself saving those notes in a drawer. They were small proofs of change, the kind that can't be sold or faked. On Sundays, we went to the flea market. He'd walk beside me, hands in pockets, eyes scanning old furniture and rusted tools. Once he stopped at a stall selling vintage mailboxes. He picked up a blue one, chipped but sturdy. "This looks like ours," he said. "It does." He turned it over in his hands. "You want it?" I hesitated. "What for? I don't get much mail." "Maybe it's not for letters," he said. "Maybe it's for what you still want to keep." There was something about the way he said it that made me nod. We brought it home, cleaned it, and nailed it beside the trailer door. I labeled it with a small tag, Memories. Inside, I started placing small things, a leaf that blew in through the window, a note from him, a pebble shaped like a heart. It was silly, perhaps, but it felt like reclaiming something I'd lost, the ability to hold joy without fear. One evening, as we were eating dinner, he said, "I've been offered a full-time position. The foreman thinks I could move up." "That's good," I said. He hesitated. "It's in Sacramento." My fork paused midair. "That's far." "Yeah," he looked down. "But it's a real chance, Mom. A clean slate." I studied him. There it was, the restlessness again, the desire to move forward, to escape the weight of his past. "Do you want to go?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I think I need to." "Then go," I said quietly. "You don't owe me your presence. Just your honesty." His eyes softened. "You'd be okay here?" I've been okay before, I said. And besides, this time I'll know you're trying to build something right. He reached across the table, taking my hand. His palm was calloused, warm. I'll come back, he said. Not because I have to, but because I want to. The night before he left, we sat outside, wrapped in blankets. The stars looked sharper than usual, as if the sky itself was awake for our goodbye. He said, "You ever think about Dad? What he'd say if he saw us now?" I smiled faintly. "He'd probably scold you first, then tell me to make you a sandwich." Evan laughed. "Yeah, that sounds like him." We fell quiet. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full, like soil ready for something new to grow. Before we went inside, he looked at me and said, "You saved me, Mom." "No," I said softly. "You saved yourself." I just kept the light on. The next morning, he packed his car and hugged me tight. There was no drama, no tears, just a calm knowing that life had turned a corner. As he drove away, the dust rose behind him, glowing in the early sun. I stood there, one hand resting on the blue mailbox, the other holding my tea. Inside that mailbox, I placed one final note for the son who learned too late and loved just in time. And then I closed it, the click echoing through the quiet morning. When someone leaves, their absence has weight. It doesn't vanish into thin air. It lingers, reshaping the space around it. The chair they used to sit in becomes a monument. The silence after dinner becomes a kind of music. After Evan left for Sacramento, the trailer grew larger somehow. Every morning, I'd find myself glancing at his empty chair across the table, the one with a small stain from the night he'd spilled chili and cursed under his breath, embarrassed like a child. That stain became a wound I didn't want to clean. At first, I tried to fill the quiet with noise, the radio, the clatter of dishes, the hum of the old refrigerator. But some silences are meant to be felt. They remind you what's been mended and what's still broken. I spent my days caring for a man named Harold, 83, with trembling hands and a mind that wandered between decades. His wife had died 2 years earlier, and sometimes he'd mistake me for her. "Martha," he'd whisper, "turn off the light before bed." I'd smile softly and say, "All right, Harold," because in that small act of pretending, I found comfort too. He once told me, "We don't lose people all at once. We lose them in pieces, one laugh, one habit, one shared morning at a time." That sentence stayed with me. It was exactly how I'd lost my son, not in one betrayal, but in a slow erosion of trust, a lifetime of moments where I'd chosen silence over confrontation. Every Sunday evening, Evan called. His voice always carried the hum of city traffic behind it. "How's work?" I'd ask. "Good. Busy. I'm learning a lot. You eating well?" He'd laugh. "Trying to. I'm not living on instant noodles anymore, if that's what you mean." We'd talk about weather, work, small things. But beneath the conversation, there was a tenderness neither of us dared name. Once he said, "Mom, I saw a house today that reminded me of ours. The same front porch swing. Even the lilac bush by the gate." I felt my throat tighten. "Did you stop?" "No," he said quietly. "I couldn't." I wanted to tell him that forgiveness isn't about pretending it never happened. It's about letting the pain stop defining you. But I didn't say it. Some truths need to ripen before they can be spoken. That winter, the desert turned cold, colder than I remembered in years. The wind came in like a ghost, whistling through the cracks of the trailer. One night, I woke up to find the furnace dead. I wrapped myself in blankets and lit candles for warmth. The light flickered on the walls, casting memories like shadows. Evan at 5 years old, building forts with couch cushions. Evan at 16, slamming the door after an argument about curfew. Evan at 38, holding those papers I should never have signed. I whispered into the dark, "I still love you, even after everything." It wasn't meant for anyone to hear, but saying it aloud felt like laying down a heavy stone I'd carried too long. In February, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. An honest-to-God letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Mom, I've been promoted. They're trusting me with my own team. I wanted to tell you in person, but I thought maybe a letter means more. I've been thinking about what you said, about consistency. I'm trying to live by that, I'm also saving for a house. Not to flip it or sell it, just to live in it. To plant something that stays, love, Evan. I pressed the paper to my chest. It smelled faintly of his cologne, the same one he'd used since his college days. I could almost hear his voice reading the words. For a long time I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands, realizing that maybe redemption doesn't arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in envelopes, in ink that smudges when you cry on it. Weeks turned to months. Spring came, timid and unsure. The desert bloomed, small bursts of color in an otherwise muted world. One morning, as I watered the little cactus by my window, a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there he was, my son, standing in jeans and a denim jacket, holding a paper bag and wearing that familiar crooked smile. "Didn't tell you I was coming," he said. "Wanted to surprise you." "You succeeded," I said, laughing through tears. "Come in before the sun burns you." He stepped inside, looking around the trailer with a kind of nostalgia. "Smells like coffee and lemon polish, just like home." He handed me the bag. Inside was a small potted plant, lavender, "for your windowsill," he said. "I remembered you liked the scent." I touched the leaves gently. I did, I still do. We sat down to eat. He'd brought sandwiches, the kind I used to make him for school. It was a simple meal, but it tasted like peace. After a while, he said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back." "I wasn't counting days," I said softly. "I was counting changes." He looked at me, puzzled. "I didn't need to see you to know you were growing," I said. "I could hear it in your voice. Every call, every letter, a little steadier, a little wiser." He smiled, eyes glassy. "You always see through me, don't you?" "Only because I raised you," I said. "Mothers learn the shape of their children's souls." That night, after he left to stay at a motel nearby, I sat by the window, watching his taillights disappear into the dark. The lavender plant sat beside me, its scent soft and clean. I thought about all the things we keep, the mug, the quilt, the mailbox full of notes. They were no longer reminders of loss. They had become proofs of survival. Sometimes what's broken doesn't need to be rebuilt. It just needs to be honored. And as I turned off the light, I whispered to the empty chair, "He's trying, Harold. He's finally trying." The first letter I ever wrote to my son, he never saw. It was back when he was 15, and I'd found a pack of cigarettes hidden behind his dresser. I wanted to shout, to punish, to scold him into decency. But instead, I sat at the kitchen table with shaking hands and wrote him a letter. I told him I loved him, but I was scared. Scared of what he was becoming. Scared of losing the boy who once cried when he accidentally stepped on an ant. I never gave it to him, though. I burned it that night in the sink, watching the paper curl and darken. Some words are too fragile to hand to someone who isn't ready to hear them. Decades later, I thought of that letter again. Because now, for the first time, Evan had started writing to me. After his surprise visit, the letters came regularly. One every 2 weeks. Sometimes short, sometimes long, sometimes just a few lines scribbled between work shifts. But every one of them had something I'd waited years to see. Honesty. "I'm still learning to forgive myself, Mom. I used to think money solved everything, but now I see it only hides what's broken. I miss our old porch, how you'd hum while making tea. I wish I'd listened more. They asked me at work what motivates me. I said regret, but maybe it's not regret. Maybe it's longing for something pure I once had and lost." I would read these letters late at night, under the small lamp beside my bed. The paper smelled faintly of pencil and dust, the smell of effort. And each time, I'd whisper a small thank you to no one in particular. He was healing in his own way, and so was I. One afternoon, while sorting through an old box, I found a stack of photographs, most from the years before the betrayal. Evan's first day of kindergarten, his graduation, the Christmas we spent at the lake house, his arm around his father, both wearing identical flannel shirts. I spread them across the table, tracing each face with my fingers. It's strange how photographs lie, freezing smiles that in truth had cracks beneath them. But it's also strange how they forgive. They remind you that before the hurt, there was love. There's one photo I always pause on, Me and Evan on his 8th birthday. He's holding a toy stethoscope, grinning, pretending to check my heartbeat. He'd said, "I'll be like you when I grow up, Mom. I'll help people." And I believed him. Weeks passed quietly. The days blurred into one another. Coffee, caregiving, letters. But one day the mailbox stayed empty. Then another. Then a week. At first I told myself he was busy. Promotions, projects, deadlines. But a mother's instincts don't dull with age. They sharpen. Something in me began to stir, a quiet dread I couldn't shake. After the 3rd week, I wrote him instead, "Evan, I hope you're well. I know life gets in the way sometimes, but just know that I'm here. Same trailer, same lavender plant by the window. Don't forget that you promised to come back in spring." I mailed it that evening. The clerk at the post office smiled and said, "To Sacramento?" "Yes," I said. "To my son." She stamped it and slid it into the bin, and I watched it disappear, like tossing a message into the sea. 2 weeks later, there was still nothing. I started checking the mailbox twice a day, as if the mailman might have missed me the first time. Each time, the same emptiness stared back. Then one morning, I received a call. "Mrs. Weller?" The voice was unfamiliar, male, young. My heart skipped. "Yes?" "This is Jason. I work with your son. I'm sorry to call like this, but Evan asked me to reach out. He's been in the hospital. A construction site accident, nothing fatal, but he broke his leg and has been under observation." The world went dim around me. "Why didn't he call?" "He said he didn't want to worry you. He's ashamed, I think." I thanked the man and hung up, my fingers trembling. The irony wasn't lost on me. He sold my house while I was in the hospital. Now he was the one lying in a hospital bed. Life has a way of circling back, not with vengeance, but with lessons. That evening, I packed a small bag. I didn't tell anyone, just locked the trailer, watered the lavender, and boarded the night bus to Sacramento. The ride was long and quiet. I stared out the window, watching the desert fade into farmland, the farmland into city lights. Somewhere along the way, I thought of Harold's words again. We lose people in pieces. Maybe this was my chance to retrieve one of those pieces. When I reached the hospital the next morning, the nurse at the front desk looked up. "Who are you visiting?" "Evan Weller," I said. She smiled. "Room 312. He's been asking if anyone's called." When I entered the room, he was asleep. His leg was in a cast, his hair messy, his face thinner than I remembered. Machines hummed softly, their rhythm almost like breathing. For a moment, I just stood there, watching him, the same way I'd watched him sleep when he was a child, feverish and small. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. When he saw me, he blinked as if unsure whether I was real. "Mom?" "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly. "I heard you've been playing daredevil again." He laughed weakly. "Guess it runs in the family." I sat beside him, taking his hand. "It was warm and trembling. I should have called," he said. "I didn't want you to think that you were human?" I interrupted gently. "Too late for that." His eyes welled up. "I've been so afraid of losing your forgiveness." "You already have it," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I stop feeling what you did. It just means I choose not to let it poison what's left." He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "You came all this way for me." "I came because you're my son," I said. "And because this time, it's my turn to sit beside your hospital bed." That night, as he slept, I watched the city lights flicker beyond the window. For the first time, I realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't happen once. It's not a line you cross. It's a place you keep walking through. And maybe, just maybe, we were walking through it together now. Hospitals have a smell that never leaves you. Antiseptic, metal, faint coffee. It's the same smell I'd lived with for decades as a nurse, but now, sitting beside my son's bed, it meant something different. It wasn't about life or death anymore. It was about forgiveness breathing quietly between two people who once stopped recognizing each other. Evan was asleep again. His hair had grown longer, curling slightly over his forehead. There were faint lines around his eyes now, not just from age, but from regret. Regret leaves its own kind of wrinkles. I stood up to stretch, looking around the sterile room. A single chair, a window with smudged glass, a vase with half-dead carnations someone must have left days ago. I replaced the flowers with fresh ones from the gift shop downstairs, small white lilies. The nurse behind the counter had smiled at me when I bought them. "You're here for your husband?" "My son," I said. Her smile softened. "You must love him a lot," I paused before answering. "More than I should, probably. But that's what mothers do, isn't it?" She nodded, knowingly. When Evan woke up again, the room was brighter. "Lilies?" he said, squinting. "I couldn't stand the look of those poor carnations," I said. He smiled. "You always did hate giving up on things too soon." I raised an eyebrow. "And you always gave up too easily." We both laughed, a real, light sound, the kind that had been missing for years. After a while, he said, "You know, I used to hate hospitals. The smell, the waiting, but now lying here, I get it. They're places where time slows down enough for you to face yourself. That's why so many people can't stand them," I said. "They're forced to sit with what they've done, and who they've become." He nodded, turning serious. "Mom, when I sold your house, I told myself it was for your good. Bills, maintenance, insurance, but deep down it wasn't about you. It was about control, about proving to myself I wasn't a failure." "You were scared," I said quietly. "That's all. People do cruel things when they're scared." He frowned. "And you're not angry?" "I was," I admitted, "for a long time. But anger's a heavy suitcase, Evan. Sooner or later, you have to decide whether to carry it or keep walking." He looked away, blinking hard. "You've always had a way of making forgiveness sound simple." "It's not simple," I said. "It's just necessary." That evening, I left to grab dinner at the cafeteria. The food was terrible, gray meatloaf and overcooked peas, but after years of hospital work, it felt almost nostalgic. I sat by the window, watching the sunset over the parking lot, the sky painted with strokes of orange and purple. An older man sat across from me, eating slowly. He looked familiar, maybe another patient's father. He caught my glance and smiled. "Visiting someone?" he asked. "My son," I said. "He fell at a construction site." He nodded. "My daughter's here too. Car accident. She's stable now." There was a quiet understanding between us. Two parents waiting at the edge of fear, clinging to faith through small talk. After a moment, he said, "Children break your heart, don't they? But they also teach you how to love without guarantees." I smiled sadly. "You sound like someone who's been through it," he chuckled. 58 years old, 2 divorces, 1 daughter who barely speaks to me. I've earned my scars. We talked for a while. About children, time, mistakes. Before he left, he said something that stayed with me. The hardest part of being a parent isn't letting go. It's realizing you never really could. When I returned to Evan's room, he was awake again, staring at the lilies. "They smell like home," he said. "They smell like forgiveness," I replied. He looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "Mom, when I was signing those papers, when I sold the house, I remember thinking, it's just wood and paint. She'll understand someday. But now I know what I really sold. I sold us." I walked over and sat beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Maybe, but you can't sell what still lives inside someone. The house is gone, but the love wasn't in the walls, Evan. It was in the people." He took my hand. "I don't deserve that kind of love." "No one does," I said softly. "That's why it's called grace." He turned his face away, silent tears sliding down his cheek. The next morning, I helped him sit up for the first time. His leg was still stiff, but he was determined. "I need to walk again," he said. "You will," I replied. "1 step at a time," he grinned. "You sound like my nurse." "I was one," I said, smiling. "And I still am, apparently." By afternoon, he managed to take a few steps with the help of a walker. I watched him, every motion fragile yet brave. The same boy who once fell from a tree and refused to cry was now limping across a hospital room, chasing redemption instead of rebellion. When he sat back down, breathless but proud, I said, "You know, you're stronger than you think." He looked up, smiling. "Because of you." I shook my head. "Because of what you've learned." He nodded, eyes soft. "Maybe both." That night, as the machines hummed softly, I sat by the window again, writing in my notebook, something I hadn't done in years. Some pain doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It stops cutting and starts teaching. And maybe that's what forgiveness is, not forgetting, but learning to live beautifully with the scar. When I looked up, Evan was asleep again. Peaceful this time. For the first time since the stroke, since the betrayal, since the long nights alone in that trailer, I felt still. Not empty, not angry, not lost. Just still, I whispered into the quiet room. We're going to be all right. And somewhere between the hum of the machines and the rhythm of his breathing, I believed it. Evan recovered faster than anyone expected. Within a month, he was back on his feet, limping slightly, but proud of every step. He told me the pain in his leg reminded him to slow down, to think before moving forward. I smiled when he said that. Pain can be a teacher if you let it. When he was discharged, I stayed in Sacramento for a few days, helping him settle in. His apartment was small, tidy, surprisingly simple. A mattress, a table, and one framed photograph on the wall, the two of us in front of our old house, years ago. You kept that one, I said. He nodded. It reminds me what not to lose again. There was something in his tone, a calm I hadn't heard in him before. The frantic, restless energy that once defined him was gone. In its place was a quiet humility, the kind that only comes after you've been stripped of everything false. On my last evening there, we took a walk through his neighborhood. It was spring. The air smelled faintly of rain and jasmine. We passed a small street lined with old maple trees, their branches arching overhead like a canopy. At the end of that street stood a house, white fence, porch swing, lilac bushes by the gate. My breath caught, Evan noticed. You see it too, don't you? It's almost the same, I whispered. The porch, the windows, even the light, he nodded. It's been on the market for months. I walk by it every day on my way to work. I thought, if I ever had the chance. He trailed off, unsure if he should finish. I looked at him, my heart tightening. Evan, you don't have to buy me another house. I know, he said quickly. I don't want to buy it for you. I want to buy it because of you. Because I want to do it right this time. We stood there for a long moment, watching the curtains flutter behind the front window. A young couple came out, hand in hand, laughing about something. Their joy was unburdened, untouched by regret. And I realized something then. I didn't want that house. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it belonged to another chapter of life, one that had already been written. I turned to him and said, Let it go, Evan. The past isn't supposed to be rebuilt. It's supposed to be understood. He swallowed, nodding. Then maybe I'll find something new. Good, I said, touching his arm gently. And when you do, plant lilacs by the door. Not for me, but so you'll remember that everything beautiful can bloom again. That night, he cooked dinner, pasta with too much garlic and not enough salt, but it tasted like love. We ate slowly, talking about nothing and everything. He told me about a woman at work named Clara, kind, grounded, patient. She reminds me of you, he said. She doesn't try to fix me. She just listens. She sounds wise, I said. She is. She told me once, you can't outrun your shadow. You have to turn around and face it. Smart woman, I said, smiling. Don't let her go. He grinned shyly like a boy again. We'll see. After dinner, we sat on the balcony, the city lights stretching out before us. I could hear laughter from nearby apartments, the sound of a guitar playing somewhere below. Evan said quietly, You know, I used to think success meant owning things, cars, houses, titles, but now I think it's something else. What is it then? I asked. He looked at me. Peace, just peace. I reached over, squeezing his hand. Then you're already rich. The next morning, I packed my small bag. Evan insisted on driving me to the bus station. The drive was quiet, filled with the kind of silence that feels warm instead of empty. When we reached the terminal, he parked and turned to me. Mom, before you go, there's something I need to say. I waited. He took a deep breath. When Dad died, I was angry at you. You didn't cry at the funeral. You didn't talk about him. I thought you didn't care. But now I see. You were holding everything together while I fell apart. You've been strong for both of us for too long. I felt my throat tighten. Someone had to be. I know, he said softly. But you don't have to anymore. I smiled faintly. Oh, Evan, mothers never stop being strong. We just learn to do it quietly. He looked down, fighting emotion. I love you, Mom. I know, I said, and for what it's worth, I love the man you're becoming. He exhaled, nodding. That means more than you think. We hugged, a long, steady embrace. No tears this time, just understanding. As I boarded the bus, I looked out the window and saw him standing there waving. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was watching something begin. Back in the desert, the trailer felt different. Not empty, open. Like a wound that had finally started to heal. I unpacked my things slowly, placing the lavender plant back by the window, setting his newest letter in the mailbox marked Memories. Outside, the wind was soft, carrying the faint scent of dust and spring. I sat on the porch steps, sipping tea, and for a moment I could almost hear the echo of laughter. Mine, my husband's, Evan's. The ghosts of our home, gentle now. I whispered into the wind, "Thank you for coming back, my boy." The air stirred, warm against my cheek, as if answering. And somewhere in the distance, maybe just in memory, a screen door creaked, and the sound felt like peace. It was late autumn when the call came. I was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind rattle the dry weeds along the road. The sun was sinking low, a soft amber spilling across the sand. I remember thinking it looked like melted honey on the horizon. The phone buzzed against the wooden table beside me. I almost didn't answer. Most calls these days were from insurance companies or telemarketers who didn't understand the meaning of "do not disturb." But something in me, that quiet maternal instinct that never quite sleeps, told me to pick up. "Mrs. Warren?" a woman's voice said, polite, cautious. "Yes, this is she. My name's Claire. I'm a friend of Evan's. I hope it's all right that I called." For a moment, I said nothing. Just the name Claire, soft, familiar. "Yes," I said slowly. "He told me about you." "Oh," she said, a gentle laugh in her tone. "Then I suppose that's a good thing." I smiled. "He said you were the first person who listened to him without trying to fix him." She paused. "That sounds like him." There was a silence, the kind that stretches between strangers who suddenly share the same heartbeat. Then she said quietly, "He's been working hard, Mrs. Warren. Really hard. He talks about you a lot." "I know," I said. "He writes me sometimes." She hesitated. "He's been thinking about visiting, but he's nervous. He doesn't want to disappoint you." "Tell him disappointment only comes from silence," I said. "If he wants to come, the door's open." "Always?" She exhaled, a small sigh of relief. "I'll tell him. Thank you." Her voice had a kind of kindness that lingered even after the call ended. I sat there a long while, the phone still in my hand, watching the desert swallow the last of the light. Something told me this wasn't just about Evan finding love. It was about him finding home again, wherever that might be. A week later, he called. His voice was lighter than I remembered, but with an undertone of fear, the kind that comes before you tell someone you care what they might not be ready to hear. "Mom," he began, "Claire and I are getting married." I closed my eyes, smiling. "Well, that's wonderful news, sweetheart." "It's sudden, I know," he said quickly. "But after everything, I don't want to waste time. I want to do things right this time." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, the tremor of a man who had been to the bottom and clawed his way back up. "When's the wedding?" I asked. "In the spring," he said. "And Mom, I want you to walk me down the aisle." I laughed, a real hearty laugh that startled even me. "I think that's supposed to be the other way around." "Yeah, but you've carried me further than any father could have," he said softly. I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat burned with the kind of tears that don't fall, the ones that just sit there, waiting for the right time to be released. "I'd be honored," I whispered. In the months that followed, I helped Claire with small things. Over the phone, of course. Picking colors, discussing vows, sharing recipes for lemon cake, and advice for surviving Evan's mood swings. She was gentle but firm, the kind of woman who could calm a storm without losing herself in it. Sometimes I'd hang up and just sit there, thinking of all the women I'd known, friends, patients, mothers, and how love, at its purest, was never about possession. It was about presence. The wedding was small, intimate. A garden just outside San Francisco, filled with white roses and flickering lanterns that swayed with the wind. I wore a pale blue dress Evan had picked for me, said it brought out my eyes. When I saw him standing there in his suit, I almost didn't recognize him. Not because he'd changed on the outside, though he had, but because the tension, that invisible armor he'd always carried, was gone. He looked free. As we walked together down that aisle, his arm linked through mine, I felt every moment of our shared past flicker before me. The scraped knees, the slammed doors, the quiet apologies that came too late, but still mattered. When we reached Claire, he turned to me and whispered, "You can let go now, Mom." I smiled. I already did. He squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I felt the strength of his grip not as dependence, but as partnership. At the reception, under strings of light, Evan stood up to give a toast. His voice trembled at first, but then steadied. "I once thought success meant never needing help," he said. "But life has a way of humbling you. It takes everything you think you own and asks, 'Who are you without it?'" He turned toward me. "This woman, my mother, taught me that love isn't a contract. It's a commitment, one you honor even when it's not convenient, even when you failed it before." People clapped softly. I felt my face grow warm, tears catching the edges of my eyes. Then he raised his glass, to second chances, and to the people who still believe in us, even when we stop believing in ourselves. Everyone raised their glasses. Claire reached over and took my hand, squeezing it. Her eyes glistened in the soft light. "He's lucky," she said quietly. "So am I," I replied. Later that night, when the music slowed and the guests began to leave, Evan found me sitting alone beneath a willow tree. He sat beside me quiet for a long time. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked suddenly. "What?" "The old house. Maple Street. Dad," I breathed in the cool air. "The scent of roses, earth, and faint smoke from the candles." "I used to," I said. "But missing something means you're still waiting for it to come back." "I think I've made peace with what's gone." He nodded slowly. "Claire and I were thinking of buying a small place near the coast. Something simple. We want you to visit." "I'd like that," I said. "But don't build it for me." "Build it for you two. Fill it with your own memories." "Don't borrow mine," he smiled. "Deal." The music from the last song drifted through the night, a soft old tune from the 70s. He offered his hand. "Dance with me, Mom?" I hesitated. Then I stood, letting him lead me beneath the lights. We moved slowly, awkwardly, laughing at ourselves. And for a brief, beautiful moment, the world felt whole again. The ocean air felt different than I remembered. Softer, like time itself had slowed down just enough for me to catch my breath. I stood on the porch of Evan and Claire's small coastal home, watching the tide move in slow, deliberate strokes. Each wave seemed to erase something invisible. A regret, a fear, a memory I no longer needed to carry. It had been 3 years since the wedding. 3 quiet, generous years. Evan had built a modest life. Nothing flashy, nothing borrowed, just peace. Claire taught yoga part-time, and Evan managed a few rental listings with honesty this time. They called every Sunday. Sometimes we talked for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours. And always he'd end the call the same way. "I love you." "Mom, I'm still learning." Now, standing there with a cup of tea and the scent of sea salt in my lungs, I realized I had stopped waiting for an ending that looked like the beginning. Life doesn't circle back neatly. It bends, like the coastline itself, shaping and reshaping what it means to stay. That evening, we sat by a bonfire behind their house. The fire cracked softly, its warmth licking our faces. Claire was knitting something pale and blue for the baby they'd be having in 2 months. Evan was quiet, staring into the flames. He said, "You know, sometimes I drive past our old house. The one I sold. It's been painted yellow now." They added a swing to the porch. "Looks happy." I took a slow sip of tea. "That's good. Houses should be happy." He turned toward me, his expression uncertain. "Do you ever wish we could go back?" I thought for a long moment before answering. The fire popped. The ocean whispered behind us. "No," I said finally. "That house was never about the walls. It was about the people inside them. And we're still here, aren't we?" He nodded. "We are." I reached over, placing my hand on his. His skin was warm, steady. "Evan, you've built something stronger than any house. You built a life that can't be taken away." He blinked, eyes glistening. "You forgive me, don't you?" I smiled faintly. "I forgave you the day I walked out of that empty driveway. But forgiveness isn't forgetting, Evan. It's remembering without reopening the wound." Later that night, after they went to bed, I stayed outside a little longer. The stars were clear, the kind that made the whole sky feel like a cathedral. The sea murmured in the distance, old, wise, endless. I thought about the home I'd lost, the life I'd rebuilt, and the woman I'd become in the quiet of a trailer surrounded by sand and wind. Losing everything had stripped me of pride. Yes, but it also revealed something purer, the strength that comes when love stops being a bargain and becomes an act of faith. For years, I thought of myself as a victim of betrayal. But sitting there beneath that vast, forgiving sky, I realized I wasn't just betrayed. I had endured, and endurance, in its quiet way, is its own kind of victory. In the morning, Claire handed me a small box wrapped in linen. "Before you go," she said softly. Inside was a single silver key, old, slightly tarnished, tied with a blue ribbon. Evan smiled. "It's to the guest house out back. We thought maybe you'd like to come stay whenever you want." I turned the key in my hand. The metal was warm from hers. "You two really don't give up, do you?" "Guess not," Claire said. "Families like that." We laughed, the kind of laugh that feels light, unburdened. I placed the key in my palm and said, "Thank you. But don't worry about me. I've already got a place that knows my name." Evan frowned a little. "You mean the trailer?" I nodded. "Yes, that little patch of desert. It's mine. Not because I own it, but because I earned every quiet morning it gives me." He smiled slowly, understanding. "Then keep it, Mom. Keep it as long as you need." "I will," I said. "And when I'm gone, plant something there. A tree, maybe. Something that lasts." When they dropped me off at the bus station, the wind carried the sound of gulls over the parking lot. Evan hugged me first, longer than usual, tighter too. He whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me," I whispered back. "Thank you for finally coming home." As I boarded the bus, I glanced out the window. Evan stood there, one hand around Claire's, the other shading his eyes from the sun. And for a fleeting moment, he looked like a boy again, the boy who once fell asleep on my lap after skinning his knees, the boy who used to believe I could fix anything. But this time, I didn't want to fix anything. I just wanted to witness it. The beautiful, ordinary miracle of a life finding its balance again. The desert welcomed me back like an old friend. The wind hummed low through the brush. My little trailer stood exactly as I'd left it, sun-bleached, humble, but whole. I unlocked the door, stepping inside. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. On the table lay a stack of Evan's letters, tied with a piece of twine, and beside it, the tiny plant I'd kept alive all these years, its leaves now a lush green, almost defiant. I sat down, opened the window, and let the wind sweep through the room. It carried whispers, laughter from another lifetime, the echo of footsteps on maple wood, the sound of a son's voice saying, "I love you, Mom." And I whispered back, "Softly, I know, sweetheart, I know." As the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the world in quiet gold. I thought about everything I had learned, that sometimes the people we love will break us, not out of hatred, but out of hunger. That forgiveness doesn't rebuild a house. It rebuilds a soul, and that home isn't where you live. It's where you finally stop running from your own story. I looked around my small, imperfect space, the chipped counters, the cracked mirror, the little photograph of me and Evan from years ago, and smiled. Some homes aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be remembered, and in that remembering, they live forever. Some homes are built of wood and stone, others of lessons, losses, and love that refuses to die. The trick is knowing when to stop building and finally start living.